What's up everybody and welcome back to the channel and to another Outriders video. Recently it's become clear to me that players are starting to think when they build their classes in a more synergistic way, thinking what kind of utility or crowd control or buffing or debuffing they can offer their teammates while still being able to push out damage themselves. This is of course a very welcome change, and mostly due to the fact that timers are not a thing in expeditions anymore. So I wanted us to look at a build like this today. It's a Devastator which I use to clear content quite easily, but is very good and shines very well when you put it in a co-op situation where you can accentuate the damage and basically just buff up the entire team while debuffing the enemies. But if you do enjoy this video or you find it useful in any way, please do consider giving a like and subbing to the channel, maybe sharing the video with a buddy. It really does help the channel grow a lot, and it just means a whole lot to me. But without any further ado, let's jump right in. And when it comes to debuffing and buffing as a class, I think Pyromancer is probably, at least for me, most well known for this. This was the first class that I experimented with building in certain ways that you could buff up your team's damage while stripping armor and resistances off of enemies. However, now having built this with the Devastator, it really does seem to me like the Devastator might be the class that's actually most perfectly suited for this. Now I do plan to bring to the channel, or at least try to build this kind of character with each one of the four classes. But with the Devastator, you have so many options and so many ways that you can actually sort of build around this as a concept. And due to the natural hardiness of a Devastator and being difficult to kill, it kind of just makes sense as well, because it does sort of start feeding into that class identity, which is of course the tank, the supporter, the paladin, the whatever you want to think about it in those classic role-playing terms. Now what I like about this particular Devastator is that when I'm playing solo, I'm still able to deal more than enough damage with a combination of earthquakes, endless mass, the bleeds that you cause, and the weapons that I use, so that I'm not in any way limited to complete a CT15. Again, the Devastator is so tough in any case that you can go toe to toe with any boss in the game, and then as long as you're cycling your skills out, they're not going to be able to deal enough damage to take you down in the first place, which again just makes this such a comfortable and easy build to play. However, once you combine this in with at least one other player, two is even better, and you start using all of your skills to essentially debuff groups of monsters or lower their armor or lower their resistances or make them take more anomaly damage, then you really start seeing the synergy that this build provides alongside, whoever's playing with you. The way that I've constructed this is that it benefits AP, I would say, more, but definitely also offers utility to firepower classes. The reason why I went with AP more is because, first of all, that's the easier one to build for. There are more skills that allow for debuffing for AP than there are for debuffing for firepower, especially on the Devastator side. But on the other hand as well, is that I find that firepower classes, like a good example would be Blighted Round's Techno, scales very well into a co-op environment and usually doesn't actually require massive buffs from the other two players that are playing with to still be extremely lethal. Technomancers, bullet Technomancers have long been used as a carry class that carry two other weaker classes with them that almost have to do nothing, and the Technomancer can push through. However, if you take something like, a good example would be Ash Blast, Overheat, Pyromancer, that does not scale so well when you go up to 3 players, because you just, those big switch kills that you can usually do when you clear everything with Overheat just doesn't have enough oomph anymore to do that. However, when you combine it with some good debuffing from something like Endless Mass and allowing the targets that get hit by that or hit by your other skills to take more additional AP damage, then it kind of brings the Ash Blast, Overheat, Pyro back into the mix again. And this is true for, I would say, AP Trickster or pretty much any AP class, Phaser build, Pyromancer, so all of them work the same. So that was basically the way in which I went into building this, and the results have been pretty good. So let's go ahead and start with skills first. I use Earthquake, Gravity Leap, and Endless Mass in this build. Now, Earthquake can be swapped out for, and I've experimented with Impale as well. Impale is very good in this setup, but I just overall like Earthquake more as a skill for this, due to the way in which you move around in combat and just the fact that the Earthquakes tend to not get resisted as much as Impale does. Impale does have a little bit of a problem, especially if you impale targets multiple times in a row. that you can start seeing certain, elites and captains start resisting the impale, which of course means that you can't deal any damage with it. However, you might find success with that as well, because the other side of impale that's really good is the fact that once you impale something, and we can just quickly hover over the skill here, you'll see that once something is actually on the spike, it offers up armor and health regeneration to all of your allies that are around. Now this is really good because of course this is one of the few skills that have something baked into it like this that essentially helps you to boost up your survivability for your teammates. But I have to say again, Earthquake for me works better just in the setup that I have. I play better with it as well. And the other reason why I really enjoy it is if you are not playing with any other people, so you're playing solo, then Earthquake still does exceptionally well, especially with the combination of bleed stacks, which also still feature in this build. Now, Gravity Leap is one of the debuff tools that we have in this. In fact, it's one of the more powerful ones in the game. If you combine Gravity Leap with a mod called Despair, it allows whichever targets you hit with the Despair to take double anomaly damage essentially, which is huge. Lastly, Endless Mass. I love this skill. It's kind of like a very polarizing skill. I have spoken to Devastators who think it's the worst thing ever. I've spoken to other classes who don't like it when Devastators use Endless Mass because it's, confusing and shit's flying all over the place. I love this skill. I think it's one of the more iconic ones for the Devastator. And this is one of the main debuffs that you can apply with this class. And it is huge because Endless Mass as a class, as a mod rather, or as a skill, features several mods that you can bake into it, which make this one of the best debuff skills in the game. Now, when we go over to the actual gear itself, again, forgive the transmog. I mean, this is as a joke. This is Cannonball, of course, but the set that I'm using here is the Marshall set. Now, because I'm using Endless Mass, Marshall is a good fit for this because Marshall set bakes this additional debuff functionality into Endless Mass. So this says Endless Mass pulls enemies and causes up to 4 of them to share 40% anomaly damage and 30% weapon damage. So there's this, sort of like built in there. Again, if we go back to the class here, you'll see that Endless Mass inflicts bleed on stuff as well when it pulls it in. It deals a certain amount of damage and it also slows enemies. So you have just this melting pot of effects that are essentially hitting whatever the Endless Mass is pulling. So they are slowed, they take damage, they get bleed on them, and then now they also take additional weapon damage and additional anomaly damage. So again, just quickly popping back. Quickly, let's have a look at the weapons. So I use Funeral Pyre on here. It's very much, I think this weapon is a staple for if you play Devastator, just because of the fact that you are mostly in close range, so the shotgun range is not a problem. And then the way how Shadow Combat, Claymore Torrent, and hip firing a shotgun interacts. So if you fire into a group of enemies, then you get the proc of Claymore Torrent pulling down, the swords on 4 enemies. But because you're hip firing, you're able to hit with multiple pellets. So you can often get a situation where stacks of 4 are dropping down, where you get 4, then another 4 off 1 or 2 shots from the shotgun. So this is super, super powerful. It's a great way for you to, when you're playing solo, to clear out groups of enemies. And if you're playing in the co-op scenario, once you Endless Mass a bunch of stuff together, they're literally right in front of you as a cone, and you can just open up with this and it'll just drop Shadow Comets and Claymores all over them. Now, in terms of our secondary weapon and our pistol and our second weapon, here we feature the old school, swap mechanics. So we have Moaning Winds Radiation Splash on here, and we have Moaning Winds and Clip Combustion on the pistol. I don't particularly play this way, but it's a great additional set of DPS that's available to you if you have a situation where what you can do is you can empty out the shotgun, empty out the pistol, and then once you leap into a cluster of enemies, whatever is left alive, you can do the swap thing and you're right there next to them. So you essentially do, the Moaning Winds combo and they die. Again, I don't play it that way, and it's mostly because by the time I leap into something after they've been Endless Massed or after they've been Earthquaked and my teammates are also on them, nothing survives. So there's no real reason for you to do this. But it is a great option to have. Options in any case are always good to have. When we go over to the actual gear, as I've mentioned, we're using 3-piece Marshall. We are trying to stack as much as possible anomaly power, of course. We definitely want a hell of a lot of cooldown reduction. And then for our third stat, it can be either status or skills life leech. Status is what allows our bleeds to tick for longer, and skills life leech is of course just going to give us a whole bunch of life back. So Devastator by default is quite hardy. You do get quite a bit of additional armor and armor mitigation and all of that from the class tree, but skills life leech is just going to make it even more impossible for stuff to kill you. Now, when we look at the first set of mods here, we have wide horizons on here, which increases the radius of Endless Mass. Endless Mass has a relatively okay-ish radius by itself, but this just makes it really great, and it's able to snatch enemies from below where you throw it and actually pull everything around. Now, what's important to know is anything that's busy using a skill at that time or something is going to get interrupted and pulled. So this is again a great way to disrupt enemies that are messing with your allies. We use Blood Shock on here as our second mod because this allows Earthquake to make things bleed. Without this, Earthquake just does flat anomaly damage, but this will make each enemy hit by the Earthquake bleed as well. And remember, this just feeds back in additional life to you, and the bleeds end up being quite a big source of DPS for your character in the first place as well. When we go to the chest piece, here we have high intensity. This says that anomaly damage against affected targets increased by 33% for 5 seconds. So this just further on, as I've mentioned at the start, this tends to be weighted towards additional anomaly damage being dealt. So this just further on accentuates the anomaly damage that hits anything that's, you know, part of the Endless Mass effect. And here's Despair, as I've mentioned before. Despair says that anything that's in the radius of where you land with the gravity leap receives double, 2 times more anomaly damage for 5 seconds. Now, what's important to notice is these buff timers or debuff timers are very short. The windows are small, right? So usually we're used to certain classes having 10 seconds for something or 8 seconds for something. These are some of the smallest windows that we have, so 5 seconds. So you do have to kind of get into the rotation. And of course, teammates that play with you need to also understand that when they see you leap to something, like that's the time to start throwing stuff on as soon as you land. Same thing for Endless Mass. When the Endless Mass goes down, focus on whatever's around the Endless Mass and then continue on with what you're doing. When we go over to the pants, we have our second Quake here. We're not going to go all the way up to 3 Quakes with this build. We're only going to get 2. But again, this is more also for when you play solo. But 2 Quakes do introduce quite a bit of damage, and you can often use it to sort of like cover 2 different areas. So you can hit a cone this way, hit a bunch of stuff, hit a cone that way. The other thing, of course, is you can throw down Endless Mass, which pulls everything into a nice little area, which you can overlap with 2 Earthquake cones. So it works really well. We also use Bone Crusher on here, which just increases the flat damage, that damage that Endless Mass just does by itself, which is also considered anomaly damage, by the way. Increases that by basically 100k. So this starts making the Endless Mass also deal quite a bit of damage. When we go over to the gloves, we have Ground Crush on here. This makes the flat damage of Earthquake also a little bit higher, almost 100 as well, 85k. And again, this is kind of like a free mod. I have this on here because this is how I found this piece. In an ideal world, I probably, especially if I'm playing this in a co-op environment, would change this out for an additional debuff or buff to throw in here, because the earthquakes, when you hit with the earthquakes, it's not so much that you want to be killing stuff with them. Yes, of course you do want to deal damage and you want to kill stuff, but it's the bleeds that come from that, as well as the debuffs that it offered, that are the big shining points of it. One of those debuffs, as I'm mentioning, is Asunder, which is an earthquake mod. That's the one below it. It says that whenever you use this skill, so when you earthquake something, it reduces the armor of affected enemies by 20%. So this is a forever change. So whatever you hit with this, it reduces its armor, and that armor is gone. So over time, you are actually making enemies weaker too. And so if something survives getting hit by that first wave of it, just know that whatever hits it next is going to be able to deal even more damage because it has less armor. Then when we go over to the boots, I have Earth Legacy on here, which increases the range of Earthquake. This is kind of like you have to have this. I tried to play around with not having this, but the simple distance that you can cast Earthquake on and how far it reaches is just so short that if you're used to playing with Earth's Legacy, you're constantly going to miss with Earthquake, because you're just going to misjudge how far the Earthquake will go, how far it will penetrate, and that's just not good enough. So definitely Earth's Legacy, I would say, is good here. Now, Untamed Power as the final mod for us to discuss is kind of like a Devastator staple. The point is that you are quite often right in the thick of things. You're very close range. When you leap in, you're right next to enemies. When you cast Endless Mass, a very good combo is also to throw the Endless Mass down and then run in and do an AoE melee smash, which is we're going to look at in the class tree, but gives you, even more additional damage. So Untamed Power is like a no-brainer here, because the point is you're going to be in close range, you're going to be close to 5 meters to stuff, and so every time when you use a skill, if you leap and you land and you melee, it pulses out this Untamed Power damage. Then if you drop 2 quick earthquakes from right where you're standing, whatever's standing around you that's not getting hit by the earthquakes are still being hit by 2 Untamed Powers as well. So you can play around with this. If you're not used to playing in the close range distance and not used to something like Untamed Power, it is going to take some playing to sort of get used to the fact that you always need to be positioning in a way where your skills can hit with this pulses of the Untamed Power when you're ready. But once you start doing that, you're gonna notice an insane leap in DPS, especially if you play around it not quite nicely. Plus, when you look at your DPS breakdown at the end of an expedition, you're gonna notice that quite a substantial portion of it comes from this, especially on monster maps where you tend to get crowded and shit jumps on you. Then when we get to the class tree, we're of course going bottom tree with like a slight little peel upwards here. We want to be picking up as much as possible anomaly power while making all of the skills which we have like earthquake and endless mass be more effective, as well as lower their cooldowns. We also want to be going into as much as we can afford bleed augmentation, so either making bleeds last longer, make them tick harder, anything like that. So when we go down here, one of the first nodes that we can sort of like focus on is strong arm with the anomaly. I spoke about the situation just now where you put an endless mass down and then you run in and you AoE melee. That's OP as hell, because basically what happens is let's say endless mass in 6 or 7 enemies. That means when you AoE melee and you hit all 7 of them, you get 7 times 15% resistance piercing, which is huge, because after that, if you then quickly throw out 2 earthquakes, that's going to hit like a Mack truck. The reason why we go up here is we do pick up Into the Fray, which increases our damage mitigation by 15%, and this is every time after your leap ends and after your endless mass ends. So again, this is just a way for you to make this Devastator incredibly hardy. You're not going to be able to, die. I mean, I'm sure, yeah, you could die, but it's gonna take some doing. You're gonna have to want to die with this class to actually go down. It is extremely durable. We also just go one more up here to just get the cooldown on leap and endless mass. Then as we go through here, this is fairly basic stuff. We're not picking up any massive, major nodes. I would have loved to work strong arm of the law into this as well. Maybe by taking one less node of bloodbath. To be honest, I'd experiment a little bit more with it and see which one works for me better. But at the moment, this is the way that I have the setup. We do get protected by the anomaly because this just increases we're stacking a shitload of anomaly power, so this just gives us 40% of that as armor, which again is huge. It gives you a lot of physical damage resistance. Then we do get skilled sentry, which increases our armor by 20% and our resistance by 20% when skills end. So this skilled sentry combined with Into the Fray is a huge amount of damage mitigation that you get. And that's the thing, whenever you start seeing, oh shit, I'm starting to take like a little bit of damage, as soon as you leap, you'll see basically suddenly you're like really like a tank, and you start taking a lot less damage. Last but not least, we do get Earth's Heritage, because what this does is it just makes our earthquakes hit for more. If you, for instance, decide to not go Impale or Earthquake, and maybe for some reason you build this and you put in Golem or Reflect Bullets so that you can, oops, sorry, I'm jumping around, so that you can perhaps put something like Paladin in so that you can get even more anomaly, then you can of course free up this one, and this one is the one that could go into Paladin. So there's some tweaking and some playing around that you can do with this, and I invite you guys to definitely give that a try. That's it for the build. Let me know in the comments down below what you think of this. Have you tried something similar? I have quite a few people on the Discord, which by the way, go into the description of this video and join us. We are all Outriders and other game players, a bunch of like-minded people. There's rooms where you can I am Groot, where you can crew up or group up with people, and you can attempt content, you can get carries, all of that. We also have regular streams where we all play together and carry people through CT content, and the best way for you to know when those are going to be is obviously to be on the Discord as well, so come and join us. But like I said, let me know in the comments down below if you play something similar to this, if you would build it different, what you would swap out, and also which other classes you've been experimenting with and building like these kind of synergistic loadouts that are not so much about making you shine, but rather making the guys that stand next to you shine. I really like this way of playing, and you'll be seeing quite a few of these builds coming to the channel in like the next couple of days. But thank you so much for watching, especially if you made it this far. And it's just super important to me that you have a fantastic morning, a great afternoon, and an awesome evening wherever you are in the world. Until next video, fucking cheers.
They want the best of me now, best of me now, best of me now, best of me. They want the best of me now, best of me now, best of me now, best of me.